This week I am still researching on my chosen topic about Native American and Mormon relationships in the mid-1800s. As with other weeks, my research has been enhanced, and I have found that the Proquest Historical Newspaper Database is an adequate resource in my research. I performed both basic search without filters and then set a strict time frame requirements in my secondary search. During each time I managed to find articles that were relevant in part of my field of inquiry. I am sure with more time and dedicated research using this database that I will be able to acquire more articles that can assist me in my research going forward. The first news story I found was from the Baltimore Sun dated June 6, 1848 and was entitled More Indian Abnormalities. It is a brief account about recent Native American attacks against the Mormon settlement in Salt Lake City. There was reporting that there had been frequent hostilities between the Mormon settlers and the native tribes since settlement. This would have come at the time of the earliest portions of settling in the Salt Lake Valley by the Mormon pioneers, and would show that these initial meetings between the two competitors for territory in the area had not started off on peaceful terms. News stories, especially with establishing dates such as this one, will allow for me to have a starting point to build research from in order to see if I can find more stories about conflict in this time frame. The next article is from the New York Times dated March 16, 1858. The article entitled Ladder from Salt Lake, Memorial from the Legislator to Congress, Mormon haranguers in the Tabernacle, Brigham determined to rebel. The story itself is fairly short, focused on the ideas that Brigham Young was in the midst of stirring up the Native Americans up in Oregon, and it was stated that he was offering bounties if they stole horses for him. The Times notes that the Young's language was less violent than in times past, but also noted that other Mormon preachers were still forceful in their language about the United States government. The most important sections of the story for my research comes from the letter addressed to Congress and to the President of the United States. In the letter to the Congress and President, Young expresses confusion over the movement of federal troops towards Utah. But for my research, the telling section and interesting portion is Young asking to be compensated by the government abilities and maintaining peaceful relationships with the native tribes. He argues this would be more prudent use of the millions of dollars that was being expended on the army that was marching on Utah. It does seem to contend that the Mormons were attempting to peacefully coexist with the natives in the region at this time, but were also willing to use force to suppress them. The last news story is also from the Times dated June 12, 1858 and is entitled The Utah Expedition Is Peace or Is It War? The article contains a story that tells about an Indian raid on a Mormon cattle ranch that was being tendered along the Army's marching route. One half of the newspaper report is focused on the Army's perspective of the event, with the Army solely placing blame on the murder of the two Mormon ranchers on the head of natives who had initially came into the camp and offered to steal cattle for the Army after they were denied by the Mormons to buy them. But the Army said they refused the offer and told the natives that they would not condone such activity as stealing. The other perspective is from Mormon ranchers who claim the Army was paying the natives $150 per Mormon scalp. The newspaper does not take a side, but instead presents the evidence and allows for the reader to decide on the truth. It is an interesting style of presentation, but it also shows there was no great overall peace between the Mormons and the natives during this time, which is 10 years later, and that violence might have been used to suppress the native people. The benefit of using news sources and the ability to pinpoint dates and events of occurrences is indeed helpful when engaging in research. This has allowed me to tighten up my zones and be able to focus on specific time frames that might produce more information. The one problem also is that the stories are often broad, and most of the news stories I have covered tended to deal mostly with the Mormons and the federal government when they were about to wage war upon each other. The natives often came up only as a simple backdrop or an actor in the story, not a main focal point. Again, I am sure with more time, I will find more effective use for this database in my research.